These three disturbing Christmas horror stories are inspired by real events. First, an emergency breakdown at a Chevy dealership on Christmas Eve forces a woman into a shuttle ride where the driver's helpfulness slowly rots into a suffocating obsession. Next, a festive light war shatters a neighbor's sanity, twisting a joyful suburban display into a gruesome act of rage on the snowy lawn. And finally, a grieving widower shares his holiday feast with a silent guest, only to wake up with 24 hours missing from his memory. Make sure you watch until the very end, because the real nightmare isn't the blackout. It's the impossible token left waiting for him in the empty room. There is a specific kind of trust we give to systems. We see a uniform, a clipboard, a company vehicle, and we lower our guard. We assume the person behind the wheel has been vetted, hired, and tracked. We assume they are part of the machinery of safety. But sometimes the uniform is just a costume, and the machinery is broken. For Alex, the realization didn't come until it was too late. It was in a quiet neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio. The local Chevy dealership around the corner was usually a bustling place, but tonight it was a ghost town of gray concrete and humming fluorescent lights. It was cold, that damp Midwest chill that cuts through every layer of clothing. Alex stood on the curb, shifting weight from one frozen foot to the other. The service department had been clear. The flat tire was actually a busted axle. The car wouldn't be ready until tonight. A beat-up service shuttle rattled around the corner. It was an old white van, the kind with rust eating at the wheel wells. It groaned to a halt in front of Alex. The brakes squealed, a high-pitched metal-on-metal sound that cut through the quiet night like a scream. The driver's side window rolled down. A man leaned across the empty passenger seat. He wasn't wearing a dealership polo, just a thick, generic winter coat. He offered a smile that was just a little too wide. It didn't reach his eyes. "Hop in," he said. "Get you home for the holidays." Alex climbed into the back. The interior smelled of stale coffee and an overwhelming chemical pine air freshener that burned the back of the throat. It was supposed to be a short 15-mile ride, just 15 miles to the safety of home. Alex leaned back, hoping to just stare out the window at the passing Dayton streetlights. But the driver, Ray, didn't let the silence settle. He launched right into it, barely watching the road. "Long night?" Ray asked, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "I hear you. I got a long trek myself. I actually live about 50 miles south, down near Cincinnati." Alex nodded politely, not really listening. 50 miles, Ray repeated, his voice low. "It's a long way to drive in the dark, a long way to be alone." The air in the van seemed to get heavier. Ray kept talking. He spoke about how empty his house was near Cincinnati. He asked questions that were too personal, firing them off too quickly. Where did Alex work? Did Alex live alone? Alex answered in short, clipped sentences, trying to build a wall with words. "It's just a chatty employee," Alex told herself. "He's just lonely." But the skin on the back of Alex's neck was prickling. It was the body's ancient alarm system ringing a warning. When the van finally pulled up to Alex's curb, 15 miles later, the relief was physical. Alex hopped out, muttered a quick "Merry Christmas," and practically ran to the front door. Christmas Eve was over. The transaction was done, or so Alex thought. The house was quiet at 11 o'clock. Alex was sitting on the couch, the only light coming from the Christmas tree. The phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sound was sudden and loud in the silent room. A text message. "Unknown number. Just letting you know about the repairs, Alex." It was Ray. Then a picture came through. It was a photo of the Chevy dealership lot. It was deserted. The security lights cast long, distorted shadows across the pavement. There was no car in the bay, just empty asphalt. Alex stared at the screen. It felt wrong. Why was the driver texting updates? But Alex pushed the feeling down. He's just working late. He's being helpful. An hour later, midnight. Buzz, another text, same message, another picture. This one was different. The angle had shifted. It was closer to the service bay doors now. Someone was standing there, in the dark, taking these photos. Someone was thinking about Alex at midnight on Christmas Eve. This was no longer a coincidence. It was a pattern. And a pattern implies intent. Christmas morning brought a gray, overcast sky. The car was ready. Alex had to go back. Ray drove the shuttle again. Alex sat in the back, heart hammering against the ribs. The ride was agonizingly different this time. Ray was silent. He didn't ask a single question. He just drove, a small, tight smile playing on his lips. They pulled into the service bay. Before Alex could open the door, Ray reached over. In his hand was a small object. "For you," he whispered. It was a Christmas ornament, hand-stitched red felt, clearly handmade. Alex froze. To make this, Ray had to have spent hours thinking about it, planning it. While Alex was trying to forget the creepy ride, Ray had been sewing this thing. "Take it," Ray said. Alex took it. The felt was rough against the skin. The gesture was sickeningly intimate. "Thanks," Alex managed to choke out. Alex got into the repaired car and drove away. It's over, Alex thought. 15 miles, distance. But by late afternoon, a knock came at the door. 3 solid thuds. Standing on the porch was Ray. He held a massive gift. Alex gripped the door frame, knuckles white. The math hit Alex like a physical blow. Ray lived near Cincinnati. He had driven 50 miles, an hour each way, on Christmas Day, just to find the house of a customer he met once. "Ray," Alex said, voice tight. I can't. I'm sick." Ray's smile faltered. "I've been throwing up all morning," Alex lied, stepping back. "It's a stomach bug. I can't have guests." "Oh," Ray said. He looked down at the gift. "I just wanted—" "Thank you," Alex cut him off. "Thank you very much. Have a happy holiday." Alex closed the door and threw the deadbolt. Ray lingered on the porch, then walked away. Alex didn't call the police. He just brought a gift, Alex reasoned. I handled it. But the fear didn't leave. The next morning, December 26th, the sky was still dark. Alex's phone lit up. A voicemail. It was Ray. He sounded happy, calm. "Good morning, Alex. I hope you're feeling better. I'm in town. I drove all the way up from Cincinnati again. I'm coming over for breakfast. See you at 9. Alex dropped the phone. It was 10 minutes to 9. Alex ran to the window. Down the street, the white shuttle bus was parked. Engine off. Hazard lights blinking. Click-clack, click-clack. The orange lights flashed in the fog, rhythmically, hypnotically. The bus was empty. Ray was close. Alex dialed 911. "There's a man stalking me," Alex whispered. "He's parked outside in a shuttle bus." The operator was calm, dismissive. "Is he on your property? Has he made a direct threat?" "No, but if he's legally parked, we can't send a unit just for a vehicle. Call us if he tries to enter." The line went dead, the system failed. Desperate, Alex called the dealership. Maybe they could recall him. Maybe they could radio him to come back. The service manager answered on the second ring. "This is Alex. Alex said, voice shaking. "I need you to call your driver, Ray. He's outside my house with your shuttle. He's harassing me." There was a long silence on the other end. "Who?" the manager asked. "Ray, your shuttle driver. The guy who drove me on Christmas Eve and yesterday." "Alex," the manager said, his voice dropping to a confused, serious tone. "We don't have a driver named Ray. Our shuttle driver is named Steve, and he was off for the holidays." Alex felt the blood drain from the face. "But he was driving the van. He had my address. He texted me about the repairs." "We had a break-in on Christmas Eve," the manager said, panic rising in his voice. "Someone stole a backup van off the lot, and they took a stack of service sheets from the counter. The police are already looking for it." The phone slipped from Alex's hand. Ray wasn't an employee. He was another customer. He had seen Alex in the waiting room. He had seen the address on the paperwork. He had stolen a van and pretended to be the driver just to get Alex into the back seat. There was no professional boundary. There never was. Alex looked out the window. The shuttle bus was still there. The hazard lights were still blinking. Click-clack, click-clack. It was 9 o'clock. Ray didn't knock. The doorbell didn't ring. He never came for breakfast. Alex stood by the window, peering through the crack in the blinds, waiting for the figure to emerge from the fog, waiting for the handle to turn. New Canaan, Connecticut, in 1997, was not the kind of place that bred ghosts. It was a place that bred rules. It was a fortress of manicured lawns and stone walls, a town where old money bought a deep, quiet sense of safety. The residents believed that if they kept their hedges trimmed and their paint fresh, the chaos of the outside world could never touch them. That sense of order was the only thing that mattered. But order is fragile. It only takes one small crack for the ugly truth to bleed through. For this quiet cul-de-sac, that crack appeared in December. It started with a light contest. For years, the contest had belonged to one woman, Brenda, the HOA president. Her displays were legendary for their cold perfection. Every bulb was white. Every string was straight. Her lawn looked less like a celebration and more like a geometry equation. But that year, the Stevens family, Eliza, Dean, and their 7-year-old son, Felix, decided to compete. They didn't care about geometry. They cared about joy. Their display was a riot of color, a messy, blinking, chaotic splash of red, green, and blue that spilled across the snow. And for the first time in neighborhood history, the Stevens family won. Brenda did not just get mad. She went to work. To Brenda, losing wasn't just a disappointment. It was a violation of natural law. She demanded recounts. She filed formal complaints claiming the wiring was a fire hazard. But Eliza Stevens stood her ground. When Brenda came knocking with threats, Eliza slapped the official city permits onto the table right in front of her. Brenda was cornered. The one thing she needed to feel human, control, was slipping through her fingers. The pressure inside the woman across the street began to rise, silent and invisible, like steam in a sealed pot. Christmas Eve arrived. The night was bitter cold, the kind of New England freeze that turns the air sharp and dry. Inside the Stevens home, it was 9:30. The house was winding down. Upstairs, 7-year-old Felix wasn't in bed. He was lying on the floor, his cheek pressed flat against the freezing glass of the window. He was watching his lights, loving the way the colors reflected off the snow, turning the front yard into a magic carpet of red and green. Then he saw the shape. It moved in the shadows near the big rhododendron bush. It was hunched over, dark and heavy against the white snow. At first, Felix thought it was his dad fixing a loose plug. But the movement was wrong. It was too jerky, too deliberate. It moved with a strange, angry energy that made Felix's stomach tighten. Then, the sounds began. Through the glass, Felix heard a noise that didn't belong in a silent winter night. It was a wet, heavy crunch. Schlick thwack. It sounded like a thick bone being crushed. Immediately after came a sharp pop. Suddenly, the green section of the display died. The lights didn't flicker. They just vanished. A patch of black darkness swallowed the yard. Felix stopped breathing. He watched the figure take a step forward. He heard the sound again, the heavy metallic bite of blades closing. Schlick thwack. Then the population. The red lights died next. The darkness was growing, eating the yard one circuit at a time. The figure stepped out of the shadows and into the spill of light from the neighbor's house. Felix saw the coat, classic wool, expensive. He saw the face, twisted into a mask of pure, focused rage. And he saw the hands. They were gripping a pair of massive silver gardening shears. It was Brenda. She wasn't just cutting the power. She was executing the display. "Mommy!" Felix's scream was high and thin, slicing through the quiet house. "The bad lady is killing the lights!" Downstairs, Eliza heard the terror in her son's voice. She didn't ask questions. She hit the front door at a dead run, wearing only a thin robe, her feet bare against the cold floor. She threw the door open and sprinted out onto the porch. The air hit her like a wall of needles. The pathway was coated in black ice. "Brenda!" Eliza shouted. "Stop that!" In the middle of the dark yard, Brenda spun around. She looked wild. The large gardening shears were clutched tight in both hands, held up like a shield. Behind her, the severed ends of the light strands hung like ruined black veins. "Violation!" Brenda screamed. Her voice cracked. "They are a violation of order!" Eliza didn't stop to argue. She saw a weapon on her lawn, and she reacted on instinct. She charged off the porch, her bare feet slipping on the ice. She lunged for the shears, grabbing the thick wooden handles. It was a messy, desperate grapple in the dark. Eliza tried to twist the weapon away. Brenda pulled back with the hysterical strength of someone who has lost their mind. They slipped and stumbled on the frozen ground, the metal blades flashing in the gloom. Felix had run downstairs. He pushed the screen door open, crying, stumbling out into the freezing night to help his mother. "Mom!" he cried out. Brenda heard him. She yanked back hard, putting her entire body weight into pulling the shears free from Eliza's grip. Eliza's hands slipped on the smooth wood. The shears swung loose. They moved fast, a silver blur in the moonlight. There was a sound. Not a crunch this time. It was a soft, sickening puncture sound, like a knife hitting a piece of fruit. Suddenly, everything went quiet. Brenda froze, staring at nothing. Eliza stood paralyzed, hands empty. Felix stood a few feet away. He looked down at his chest. He was wearing bright red holiday pajamas, but the red was changing. A dark, wet stain was blooming in the fabric, spreading fast, turning the bright cotton black. Felix made a small, choked noise, a tiny, scared weep. Then his legs simply folded. He dropped onto the frozen, ice-coated ground with a soft thud. The threat was over, but the damage was done. When the police arrived, Brenda didn't fight. She stood perfectly still near the hedge, the shears lying at her feet. She looked like a statue, watching as the paramedics worked on the boy. Felix survived. The blade had missed vital organs by fractions of an inch, but the scar on his chest would never go away. Brenda went to prison, of course. The judge called it an act of transient psychosis. The Stevens family sold the house immediately. They moved 3 towns over, to a neighborhood that felt looser, freer. They wanted to leave the memory of that night on the frozen lawn in New Canaan. But trauma doesn't stay in the place where it happened. It packs its bags and moves with you. 6 months later, late on a Tuesday night, Dean woke up to an empty bed. He walked downstairs, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and found the kitchen light on. Eliza was sitting at the kitchen table. The room was stark, lit only by the harsh glow of the overhead lights. She wasn't reading a book. She wasn't paying bills. She was reading the bylaws of their new homeowners association. She had a red pen in her hand. She was underlining sentences, vicious, heavy strokes that tore through the paper. "Trash cans must be concealed," she muttered, her voice low and flat. "Grass height not to exceed 3 inches. "Eliza," Dean whispered, "honey, come to bed. We don't have to worry about that stuff anymore." Eliza didn't move. She didn't blink. She just kept tracing the lines of the rule book, her fingers shaking slightly. "We have to make sure, Dean," she said. "We have to make sure no one breaks the rules. If we follow the rules, we're safe. If we control the chaos, we're safe." She finally looked up at him, and in that moment, Dean felt a coldness worse than the winter night in New Canaan. It wasn't Eliza's warm, chaotic, joyful eyes looking back at him. They were hard. They were calculating. They were terrified. It was the same look he had seen across the street in the eyes of a woman holding garden shears. Dean realized then that Brenda hadn't just scarred their son. She had infected his wife. The Order of New Canaan hadn't been left behind. It had just found a new host. And as Eliza looked back down at the bylaws, pressing the red pen into the paper until the tip snapped, Dean knew that the real horror story was only just beginning. Christmas Eve inside Roscoe's house was heavy enough to break a man's back. 5 years had passed since his wife died, and the silence in the hallways felt less like peace and more like deep water. He was sitting in the kitchen, staring at a glass of cheap wine, when the plumbing finally gave up. A pipe under the sink didn't just leak, it burst. Dirty water slapped onto the linoleum and spread toward his slippers. Roscoe didn't even get up. He just watched it. It felt fitting. The house was broken, just like everything else. Eventually, he waded through the grease and called a 24-hour service. 30 minutes later, Gregory pulled into the driveway. Gregory was tall, thin, and moved with a strange, stiff precision. He didn't complain about the holiday or the freezing weather. He just walked in, looked at the mess, and went to work. Roscoe watched him from the table. Usually a tradesman will have a radio going or curse at a rusty valve. Not this guy. Gregory worked in absolute silence. He moved his tools like he was performing surgery. Metal clicked against metal, rubber squeaked against pipe, but the man himself didn't make a sound. It felt less like a repair and more like an autopsy. When the job was done, Gregory stood up and wiped his wrench. He simply stated that the work was finished. His voice was flat, dead flat. He didn't smile. He just stood by the sink, staring at Roscoe with pale, unblinking eyes. Roscoe reached for his checkbook. He felt pathetic, an old man in a stained sweater paying for company. But Gregory lingered. He started asking questions. He commented on how big the house was for one person. He asked, point blank, if Roscoe had family coming the next day. It was nosy, but Roscoe was starving for conversation. He spilled his guts about the empty bedrooms and the quiet nights. Gregory just listened, soaking it up like a sponge. Then Roscoe made the mistake. He looked at this stranger and didn't see a threat. He saw a way to fill a chair. Roscoe explained about the 20-pound ham sitting in the fridge. He told Gregory it was way too much for one person and offered a trade of sorts. He asked him to come back the next day for lunch, framing it as a Christmas bonus. He just wanted someone to help him eat the food so he wouldn't be alone. Gregory didn't hesitate. He didn't check a calendar or make an excuse. He accepted immediately, responding so quickly it felt like he had been waiting for the invitation before he even walked in the door. Christmas morning was gray as a tombstone. Roscoe cooked the ham and set the table with the good silver. At noon sharp, Gregory knocked. He was still wearing his gray work clothes. He sat at the head of the table and didn't say a word. The meal was brutal, but better than silence. Roscoe told stories about the service and his late wife to fill the dead air. Gregory just ate. Fork to mouth, chew, swallow. He did it rhythmically, mechanically, his eyes locked on Roscoe's face the entire time. Halfway through the meal, Gregory finally stood up. He picked up the wine bottle and walked around the table, stepping up directly behind Roscoe's chair. He spoke softly, offering a toast to new traditions. Roscoe smiled. He felt a genuine wave of relief. He actually leaned back in his chair, relaxing his shoulders. He could hear the guy breathing behind him, a slow, steady rhythm. He could smell him too, a sharp, clean scent like rubbing alcohol and wet wool. It was strange, but Roscoe didn't mind. He felt safe. He was just happy to be served. Gregory tipped the bottle. The wine glugged into the glass, sparkling under the chandelier. Roscoe watched the liquid rise, feeling warm and grateful. That is the last thing Roscoe remembers. Just the feeling of gratitude. Chirp, chirp. A sharp noise drilled into his head. Roscoe gasped, sitting bolt upright in his own bed. The room was dark. The smoke detector in the hall was signaling a low battery. He felt sick, a deep nausea rolling in his gut. He looked down. He was still wearing his suit, shoes still on, scuffing the sheets. He grabbed the clock. 12 p.m., December 26th. Roscoe stared at the numbers. December 26th. Panic crashed down on him. An entire day was gone. It wasn't blurry. It was missing. A black hole in his memory where 24 hours used to be. He stumbled into the hallway, calling out for Gregory. No answer. Just the chirp of the detector. He walked into the kitchen and the real terror set in. He expected a mess. Grease, dirty plates, wine stains. The kitchen was spotless and it was surgical. The counters gleamed. The floor was mopped. The sink, the one that had burst, was dry and polished. Roscoe leaned over and sniffed the drain. It smelled like heavy industrial soap, sharp enough to burn his nose. He ran to the dining room. The table was stripped. The silver was back in the drawer, stacked in neat rows. The chairs were pushed in, perfectly aligned. Nothing was missing. His wallet was on the dresser, cash inside. The TV was on the stand. Roscoe grabbed the phone, hands shaking. He called the plumbing company and asked to speak to Gregory, explaining that the man had been at his house Christmas Eve and again yesterday. There was silence on the line. Then the boss laughed, confused. He told Roscoe he had the wrong guy. He explained that Gregory had been on leave all week, out of state visiting his mother. He hadn't clocked in since the 20th. Roscoe insisted. He told the boss that Gregory was right there in his kitchen. The boss got defensive. He told Roscoe that if Gregory was there, it wasn't on the company ticket, and that he had lied to them about his location. Then he hung up. Roscoe stood in the sterile kitchen, the smell of industrial soap stinging his eyes. This stranger had lied to get inside. He had fixed the sink to gain trust, and then he had stolen 24 hours of Roscoe's life. Roscoe didn't know if he slept through it or if he was awake and just gone. He wandered into the living room, trying to make the world stop spinning. That's when he saw it. Sitting on the arm of his leather lazy boy recliner, a small square photo with a white border, a Polaroid. Roscoe walked over to it. His breath caught in his throat. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a picture of his wife. She was smiling, looking young, sitting in that very same recliner, wearing a red sweater he hadn't seen in 10 years. He turned the photo over. On the back, written in thick black marker, was a message wishing him a Merry Christmas. Roscoe dropped the photo like it burned him. He backed away until he hit the wall, his heart hammering against his ribs. Because here's the thing. Roscoe didn't own a Polaroid camera. He never had. And that picture? He had never seen it before in his life.